And how's it going, guys? Josh Olufemi here, live from LA, and welcome to Creative Week with Herman Huang on the Olufemi channel. Creative Week is a time when we step in every day for an entire week with one of my friends that's more creative and more talented than myself, and we cover a bunch of really awesome, cool topics. So who is my bro Herman, and what can you expect from this week? Herman, also known as Coffee Liquor on Instagram, is literally one of the coolest digital content creators that I know. I could literally just sit on his Instagram forever and just literally scroll down all of his content, which is a mix of photography, captivating VFX, travel edits, and a lot of other random stuff. This week he's committed to releasing one VFX tutorial a day on the channel, which is crazy. Today we're going to be talking about the clone freeze effect. But first, of course, we're going to talk about Envato Elements. If you're watching this video, you're probably a video editor, and Envato Elements is a video editor's dream. It's a subscription service that gives you unlimited downloads of the most incredible stock footage, like cloud and fog overlays, aerial footage, fire, lightning. They also have incredible VFX packs, Premiere and After Effects templates, sound effects, royalty-free music, and literally anything you could ever want as a video editor. Just by clicking the link below, you will automatically get a free first month. You'll see that coupon for the free first month at the very end after you've finished signing up. And that's it. I use Elements literally in some regard every day. Now I got 2 tickets, one for me and one for you, and we're gonna take a quick flight over to beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia. The landscape here is just so lush and green. You can actually download the After Effects project file that Herman will be using in the description below for free. Herman Huang, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Josh. For this clone freeze effect, I first used it about 5 years ago in a web commercial, and it's a pretty trippy effect. You can use it in your music video or product video. It's not very hard to do. I'm gonna be sharing a simple way that you can do it, and also a bit of a variation in which the thing that you want to apply the effect to kind of slink around a little bit, which gives it an even trippier effect. So guys, let's dive into it. So once you have shot your footage, you're gonna bring up After Effects. So this is the clip that I shot, and I colored it as well. And basically, I'm just catching a card that I threw up in the air, and then I move the card around. So the first way that I'll be showing you is by freezing the moment that I want the clone effect to happen. So I'm gonna first put this into a new composition, just like this. And then let's say that I would like it to kind of happen around here. Actually, I feel like I can speed up this catching part and reposition part. Now, of course, for your footage, you don't have to worry about this, but for me personally, I feel like I'm going to just kind of speed up this middle section. And how I'm doing this, just really quickly, is I'm cutting the clip, and it basically duplicates the clip and cuts where the playhead is by hitting the shortcut Control-Shift-D, and then that's how I split the clip. I'm gonna right-click it, hit time stretch, and then I'm going to actually make it faster by about 200%, and that means I will put in 50 because I'm doing half the time. So I'm going to move everything over just like this and watch it back. So now it's a little bit faster, and of course you don't have to do that for your clip if you don't need to worry about the timing. In this case, I just felt like that moment could have been faster. So that's a quick little tip for you, even though it has nothing to do with the actual clone effect. I'm going to pre-compose this by hitting Control-Shift-C. I'm gonna call it card throw, and then I want the freeze effect to happen somewhere around here. So when I determine when I want it to happen, that's when I'm going to freeze the frame over here. So I'm going to hit the Control-Shift-D shortcut again, and that's how I'm going to split the clip. I'm going to right-click it, hit time, and then go to freeze frame. And then what this does, as the name implies, is it freezes the frame. So if I play it through, catch the card, and then it totally freezes for the rest of the duration. So pretty simple enough. I'm going to actually trim the beginning just a little bit and then move everything over so that it's a bit of a tighter clip. So this is looking pretty swell so far. So for this layer, I'm going to do a few things. First of all, I'm going to duplicate it. So by hitting the shortcut Control-D, that duplicates the clip. I'm going to mask around the area that I want the clone effect to happen. I'm going to take the pen tool, and I'm going to do a nice little drawing around the object that I want to clone freeze. All right, so once you're happy with your mask, I'm going to actually feather it just a little bit, maybe by 2. So I hit F to bring up the mask feather, and then I just input the value to 2, just because it's a little bit soft. It kind of hurts me a little bit that it's a little bit soft and it's not 100% in focus, but I guess that's what happens when you're filming on your own. So if you're doing this, a quick tip is to have less shallow depth of field, or shoot it on your phone so that pretty much everything's in focus, or have a friend help you out. But during quarantine, this is the best I got. So continuing on, what we're gonna do is we're going to name this card freeze. Actually, we're gonna call this clone since it's the clone freeze effect. So before I move on with the clone layer, I actually want to duplicate this layer and call this cutout, because I'm going to have all the clone cards kind of echo behind the playing card itself. So I need a layer on top so it gives that illusion that the clones are behind it. Now, if that sounds a little bit wordy, let me just kind of demonstrate. So for this cutout, I'm going to have all the cards kind of, let's say, come out this way, so diagonally to the top right, and I'll get a little bit fancy as well and have the cards clone downwards as well. So I'm going to additionally mask the areas that I don't want the clone to be in front of. So it wouldn't make sense if the cards kind of came out and through the finger. So I'm going to mask around here and we'll speed this up. And once you have your cutout, we're gonna actually label this cutout to a different color so it's a little bit easier for us to distinguish. Let's make it cyan. That's a nice color. And in contrast, for the clone, I'm going to make it red so it's nice and bold. Okay, so we're ready to move on to our clone layer and actually get into the effect. And how we're gonna do this is we're going to first keyframe the position by hitting P to bring up the shortcut. And then I'm going to hit the stopwatch so I create a keyframe there. So I'm gonna move a few frames ahead, let's say around here, and I can always adjust it later. And I'm going to move to where the first layer of the clone freeze to happen. So like this. So if I play it through, kind of does that. Might not be fast enough. Maybe I want it to move in a little bit closer like this. Now, what I suggest is easy easing these keyframes by hitting F9 after highlighting the keyframes. It'll turn into this type of shape. It looks kind of like an hourglass. And we're going to go into the graph editor like this. And then we can see the keyframes over here. I'm gonna pull the handles over like that. And you can play around this. I feel like the secret to really good motion in After Effects is by using the graph editor like so, and then adjusting the keyframes like that. And that way it smooths out and feathers the animation or the motion that you're keyframing. So that's a neat little trick for you. So I'm gonna duplicate this layer. I'm gonna actually work with the layer underneath because I want it to look like it's kind of reverbing underneath. And I'm going to hit P to bring up the position. I'm gonna go to this later position keyframe, and I don't need to touch the beginning because I want it to kind of start in the same spot. And I'm going to readjust it so that it kind of staggers and overlaps like so. Do the exact same thing a few times. And in terms of positioning and how far apart they should be, that's totally up to you and the graphic or the footage that you're using. So just play around with it. I'm basically just going through the basic procedure on how you can achieve the effect. All right, so we're gonna stop here for now. This is good enough for now. And if I play it through, it looks like that. And it's kind of rippling out all at once, which is okay if that's the effect that you would like to achieve. One other option that you have is by kind of staggering the position so that it feels like it's kind of rippling as opposed to it all expanding from the center. And how I'm gonna do that is I'm gonna highlight all the clone layers. I'm gonna hit P to bring up their position. And then I'm going to start kind of offsetting these keyframes by maybe 2 frames like this so that the motion is kind of rippling. So it starts from the beginning closer to the card to the outer cards. And I'm gonna hit Control A to select all, hit U to show all the keyframes, and then hit U again to collapse everything just so it's a little bit easier on the eyes. And then now it kind of expands a little bit slower, but it looks kind of like there's a ripple as opposed to it all happening at once. So altogether, this is kind of what it looks like. So we're gonna get a little bit fancy here. I'm gonna actually do the same thing on the other side. So it ripples from top to right and also bottom to left. Oh my gosh, I'm so disoriented. This cutout allows me to have layers underneath without it overlapping. So I'm going to take one of these clones, this one over here. And in this case, because there's a finger cutout kind of over here, and I don't want to kind of like, if I were to offset it like this, and let's say like right now it's being covered by the hand, which is fine. But if it gets to a point where it's around here and you start seeing it, that wouldn't be too good. So you don't have to do this, but I'm just choosing to ripple it on the other side. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to hit the rotation and I'm going to go 180 because playing cards are mirrored, so you won't be able to tell. So that way this edge won't show the finger and this corner will be hidden. So I'm gonna delete this keyframe actually because I'm gonna make sure that it is starting here. I'm going to move this over like so. And I'm basically offsetting it the exact same way, just the opposite side. Boom, that is looking much better. Because it's the other side, I'm going to change the label to a different color, let's say purple, just so it's a little bit easier to differentiate your layers and you don't get confused with like all your clones. So I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to offset it. In this case, it's going to match the number of clones on the other side as well. So I think there were like 10. Wait, is this 11? So we're gonna make sure there's 11 on the other side as well. And if I zoom out, let's say if it's up to 100%, this is kind of what it looks like. Of course, this is a little bit shorter because that one's animated to extend later. And we're going to basically do the exact same thing, but on the side. And for now, I'm going to hit the tilde key. I believe it's called the tilde key. It's the squiggly line one on the top left of your keyboard. And I'm going to kind of, let's say, match with these. So I'm gonna hit P as well to bring those up. And if it doesn't totally match, it's totally fine. I think it'll still give a pretty cool effect. So hit the tilde key again. Now I see the screen. And then if I play it through, boom, does this ripply expansion effect, which is pretty trippy. Now in this case, it's cutting my arm. And I believe playing cards are not actually that sharp to be able to cut off your limbs. So in this case, I'm gonna actually set it to the Instagram portrait mode dimensions. But before that, I wanna give one more tip, and to give more, I guess, illusion of depth, I'm going to add a drop shadow to all the cards. So in this case right now, it looks like everything's really flat, and that's okay if that's the effect that you want to achieve. In this case, I want to give a little bit of separation between the playing cards. So what I'm going to first do is I'm going to hit the cutout layer. I'm going to find a drop shadow, and I'm going to drop that on here, and I'm going to play around the settings so that there is drop shadow. And in this case, for only the cutout, I think I'm going to have shadow on both sides, so the top right and the bottom left. So in this case, I'm just going to play with the distance to what I feel looks good, kind of like that. Maybe change the opacity to 30 so it's not too harsh. And I've got some drop shadow on the top part. Now I'm going to also just duplicate it by hitting Control D, and then I'm going to change the direction to the other side. And I'm only going to do this for the cutout layer. Now for the rest of the playing cards, I believe the top part, I'm going to add a drop shadow just on the top part over here. So I'm going to take the first drop shadow that I work with, which is the one heading towards the top right, and I'm going to apply it to all the red ones, because all the red ones are the ones that are on the top right. So I'm going to hit Control V to paste all the drop shadows over, and now it gives this sense of depth. And I'm going to take this drop shadow, and if you did not rotate your footage like I did, then you would take the other drop shadow and have it make sure that it's facing the same way. If you rotated it like I did, then you can use the exact same drop shadow because it'll face the same direction. And I'm going to highlight all the purple ones, hit P, and now I have a drop shadow on all the layers. So if I play it through, boom, this is what I get. Looking pretty sick. Now we're basically done the clone freeze effect. We've done the basic procedure. This is what it looks like, but I'm gonna provide a quick few tips that can make it look even more sick and add a bit of spice to it, so it's even more eye-catching. What I'm gonna first do is I'm gonna highlight everything by hitting Control A, and then I'm going to pre-compose it, Control Shift C, and then call it clone freeze effect, whatever you'd like to call it. I'm going to change the composition setting to my final delivery kind of resolution. So Control K will be the shortcut to bring up composition setting. I'm going to call it for Instagram. I'm going to change the dimension to 1080. The height will be 1350, which I believe is the resolution for an Instagram post if it's on portrait mode. I'm going to hit S to bring up my scale, and I'm going to basically scale and reposition everything so that it doesn't look like I have a chopped off arm. So let's do that. Maybe we'll center it. And then if I play it through, looks like that, which is kind of cool. And if I want to get a little bit fancier, I can kind of have it slowly scale by keyframing the position and the scale. I'm going to keep going up to here. I'm going to bring the scale to maybe, let's say 88, like this, and reposition it like that. And that way, when I play it through, there's a subtle push in if I fit up to 100, like that. and it adds a little bit of motion even though you froze everything. And that's a nice little detail to make it look more dynamic. We're gonna add one more thing. I'm going to right click, hit new, adjustment layer, and I'm going to add a bit of like a brightening glow effect in the moment that the clone freeze happens. So this is optional for you because like I said, you're basically done your clone freeze effect. I just want to get a little bit fancy and provide you with options. We're going to rename this to glow. I'm going to pull up the glow effect. I'm going to use this plugin called Effects Console, which is free by Video Copilot, which I love to use because it saves you a little bit of time from grabbing it from the effects and presets panel over here. I'm going to search up glow. And then this is a little bit too much, so I'm gonna play with the settings over here to whatever I believe looks kind of good. And I want it to happen around here. So I'm going to keyframe the glow intensity by hitting the stopwatch, hit U to bring up my keyframes. I'm gonna hit 0 over here, and I'm basically going to have it kind of glow before the freeze effect happens. And then come back out. So if I play it through, it kind of does this glowy effect. And you can play with the position of the keyframes to match with the timing that you believe is correct. I'm gonna do one more thing. I'm going to add a curves layer on top as well and just have it a little bit brighter, a little more contrasty. And then I'm going to pull up the hue and saturation as well and have it desaturate a little bit just because this is the type of effect that I enjoy using. And I'm going to also, let's say, hit T to bring up the opacity. And at this point, I can make it so that it doesn't happen until later. And actually, I didn't have to keyframe the glow intensity if I planned on using the opacity as well. But in this case, it was just kind of a last minute idea to include these other things. Because sometimes when you're editing, you just jazz it and you just add in some extra effects. And of course, take away effects if they don't work as well. So when I play this through, this is looking pretty cool. And you are done method 1 for the clone freeze effect. Congratulations. Now before we continue, if you're liking the video so far, please check out my Instagram page @CoffeeLicker, and you can see what I've been working on. Shoot me a DM if you want to chat, or if you got any questions as well, because I'd be more than happy to reply back. All right, let's continue. So now we're gonna move on to the slightly more advanced version where the cards kind of slink around as they ripple. And I'm going to borrow the composition that I used earlier, this card throw one, just because I retimed it earlier. And I'm going to create a new composition over here. And we're gonna call it Slink. Actually, the dimensions are already set to Instagram, which is great. So I'm gonna hit OK. This is our new composition. I'm gonna go back to the old one so we can copy and paste this footage. Of course, I need to rescale and position it so it fits. And then in this case, I'm not going to freeze the ending because when I play it through, I have this extra motion for it to move around. I'm actually gonna kind of have it ripple on the top right, so not on the bottom left this time. So I'm going to give a little bit of room over here so that when I catch the card, it'll kind of clone freeze this way. And then when it slinks around, I'm giving some extra room for it as well. Maybe just a little more space, kind of like that. And that should be good enough. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is we're going to pre-comp this and call it card throw scaled, because that's what we did. I'm gonna move all the attributes into the new composition. So before we actually get into the cloning itself, we're going to track this playing card so that the movement tracks the motion of the playing card. So how we do that is I'm going to add in Mocha. Now you can do this natively in After Effects, or you can use the Mocha effect. I like using Mocha because I believe that it gives slightly more accurate results, at least from my use. So if you've never used Mocha before, don't be too intimidated. All you have to do is hit this pen tool and then draw over the area that you would like to track. I'm going to hit this forward track, and it's going to track the playing card like magic. And then I'm going to stop here because my clip ends here. I'm going to track backwards, and of course it's going to be a moment where I catch the card where it's going to do this because it can't track it anymore. So I'm going to hit OK again, hit Control S to save this data, and then I can close it. And back in After Effects, I have the data. But I'm going to actually apply the tracking data to a null object, so it's off of this layer, by right-clicking, hitting New, and then Null Object. This null object doesn't mean anything until you put things on it, so I'm going to rename it, call it Track, go back to this layer, and go to tracking data, create tracking data, and I'm going to hit OK because this is the only tracking layer that I worked with. I'm going to change the export option, not to corner pin, but to transform, and then layer export to track. Now that's a bit of a crash course on how to do some basic tracking in Mocha and bring it back into After Effects. So I'm going to apply export. And then now if I hit U to bring up all the keyframes in this layer, you can see that the position, scale, and rotation have now have data. So as you can see, the null object is basically this red box tracked onto the playing card. And that's going to be handy later because the clones are going to follow this track layer. So we're going to go back, we're going to find the sharpest motion or the sharpest moment, like somewhere around here. And I'm going to hit Control D and I'm going to freeze this just like I did before. Right click, time, freeze frame. I'm going to delete this Mocha AE just because I don't need it on my clone layer. So delete, we're going to rename this to clone so it's easier for you to remember, easier for me to remember actually. I'm going to label it to, let's say, cyan. That's a nice color. And what we're going to do is start masking around this just like what we did before. And remember, we're basically only masking the object that we would like to have the clone freeze effect happen. All right, so we've got this masked. So if I solo this by hitting this solo toggle, it gives me this playing card and it's not going to move because I froze it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to parent it by hitting this pick whip and pick whip it over to the track layer. And what that's going to do is it's going to tell this clone layer that, hey, you got to follow this track layer. So if the track layer is going to move, then this playing card is going to move too. And we're going to basically do what we did before. And we're going to keyframe the position by hitting P, stopwatch, going to a few frames forward and then moving it over like this. We're going to easy ease by hitting F9 and highlighting the keyframes, and then go to the graph editor, pull the handles so they look like this, and then I'll just kind of slope and ease out. So this is what you have so far. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a cutout layer, just like what we did before. Otherwise, it's going to show this finger over here and this playing card looks like it's on top of it, which doesn't look cool. So we're going to take advantage of this track layer by having the mat tracked onto it. If you don't know what that means, I'm going to actually create a new solid by hitting Control Y, and then we're going to call this mat. All of this will be explained as I do it. I'm going to hide the visibility of this mat and maybe this clone layer too, so that I can see what's underneath here. I'm going to basically highlight this and draw a mask over the area that I want cut out, just like what we did before. Except this time, we're not going to be drawing it on the footage itself, because then we'd have to keyframe each frame to match the motion of the playing card. And we have the luxury of a track layer right now, so we're going to make full use out of it by tracking the mat layer. So this side can be a little bit sloppy because none of the playing cards will go on that side. And then I'm going to hit F to bring up the feather and hit 3 just so it blends a little bit better. So what we're going to do next is, just like before, we're going to parent this over to the track layer. And what this does, if I turn on the visibility of the mat layer, is it will follow the track like this. So it looks like I'm holding a white playing card sort of, which is kind of funky. And you can always adjust the mask. So in this case, like it doesn't cover this area. In this case, I'm not going to do it, but you can keyframe the mask path by hitting M and then just readjusting it. But I'm just going to move along for now because I think that's not going to be much of a problem. I'm going to duplicate this bottom layer, which is the footage that we see, and I'm going to put it right underneath the mat layer. And basically, we're going to use this mat layer to kind of tell what's going to be shown in this layer. By going to the track mat area, we're going to select Luma Mat. And now, if I were to solo this, it shows only the part that we masked in the mat layer. So that's a neat piece of knowledge for you to take away with if you don't know about this technique already. So when I go back now, we're going to actually duplicate this track layer and then parent this over to the track 2 layer. And the reason we're doing this is because we're going to pre-comp all of this by highlighting all of them, Control-Shift-C, and then we're going to call it cutout tracked. So we have this nice and neat. And what we're going to do next is we're also going to pre-comp these 2 layers. I'm going to turn the visibility of the clone back on like this. And as you can see, because of the cutout layer, it looks like it's actually behind the playing card. And we're going to, like I said, pre-comp this, Control-Shift-C, and call it clone. subtract, like this. And then let's change it to different colors so we know. All right, so we only have one playing card so far. So in this case, I'm just gonna trim the clip so it starts kind of around here. And here comes the fun part. We're gonna duplicate the clones like what we did before. Control D to duplicate. And I'm going to offset it like so. All right, so once I've duplicated it, I'm just gonna fit up to 100 so you can see what's going on. If I play it through, it looks like it just suddenly expands like that, which doesn't look slinky yet, but we are not done. What we're gonna do is offset these layers. And you can do them manually by just adjusting them kind of like this, and then having a stagger, or you can use a free script that you can get from aescripts.com, and it's called Shift Layers. So we're gonna pull that up, and it's going to basically save a bit of headache of doing it manually, just over here, Shift Layers. And I'm going to highlight it from top to bottom, and it does make a difference because I'm going to have it kind of stagger from top to bottom. From the Shift Layers window, I'm going to select Stagger Selected Layers, and I'm going to click Add to Existing Layer Times, and I'm going to put it to 2 frames. And basically what this does is it's going to stagger the layers by 2 frames apart from each other. So if I hit apply, you'll see what I mean if you look at the timeline. Just like magic, it staggers. And if I play it through now, it has this nice little snake effect. Now, of course, we'll kind of end the clip before the black happens. So I'm gonna adjust the render bar, and we're gonna add one detail to add some depth, and that's by, you guessed it, adding the drop shadow to the layers. So I'm gonna go back to this one that we work with, just to save a bit of time, copy the drop shadow, and paste the drop shadow. I'm gonna add it to my cutout layer as well, and what I'm gonna do is also take all the clones, highlight them, and I'm going to turn on motion blur, so that now it adds a bit of a blur while it's in movement, and I think that looks pretty cool and looks a little bit more, I guess, realistic. And the final thing I'm gonna add is that little glow effect that we keyframed earlier, and slap it on top and have it kind of happen when it decides to duplicate. So if you made it this far, congratulations, because you're done. Let's play it through and see what we've got. Ooh, we got this trippy effect that looks kind of like you're on psychedelics, I guess. Don't do drugs. Just stick to video editing. Now, of course, we want to render this out, so you can render it to whatever settings that is your favorite. So you hit Control M, and then you can just select whichever thing that you like. I personally like to queue in AME because for me, there are more rendering options, but I would suggest if you're gonna upload on Instagram, just to export it to H.264. That is it. You guys are definitely gonna wanna try this yourself and just be amazed at how it's gonna turn out. Now, subscribe to Josh Olufemi's YouTube channel if you haven't done so already for more sick tutorials, for more videos from both him or myself, and check out my Instagram as well, at @CoffeeLicker. And until the next video, guys, over back to you, Josh.
Shout out to Herman, one of the awesome teachers that we have on the channel. Thanks so much for sharing your knowledge with us, and make sure to check out all the videos in this week's creative series. They can all be linked in the description below. And lastly, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and as always, remember to keep it chill.